It's 6:37 p.m. in the Steel Community Room. We actually already called this meeting to order before our executive session, but we will do it again now here. So a quorum of the select board is here. We're out of executive session. So first up, we have approving the agenda. Is there a motion?
Vote to approve the agenda, with an amendment that will modify section E of the consent to reflect December 7th, not December 15th.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh, it was 7th. Yeah, it was the 7th.
Okay, we have a motion by Kane. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Kane, second by Roger. Is there any further discussion on approving the agenda? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, next up is, so we've approved the agenda. Next up is the consent agenda items. The minutes for December 1st and the 7th. Is there a motion on those?
I move to approve the consent agenda items as modified.
Second. Motion by Kane, second by Tori. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, the video from December 1st is not up on the website. Review it.
Okay, thank you. So noting that for whatever reason, you don't have the video up for December 1st, and you can check on that. Thank you.
Also the minutes from me, so.
Oh, thank you, Evan. And the minutes are now. I will note that for that reason, we are reapproving the minutes on December 1st because they were also not up when those were approved, and I'm pretty sure it was done publicly. Does the board still want to vote on this? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, consent agenda is approved. Next up, we have public comment. This is an opportunity to comment on things that are not on the agenda for the meeting. We ask that you keep your comments under 5 minutes and that you come up here to the table to try and help with the audio online, which we have comments about in the past. Is there anyone who would like to speak on public comment? Anyone online? Okay. Seeing none, I will move to our next item, which is consider recommendation for candidate for recreation director. Based on our memo 2 meetings ago and the town charter, department head recommendations need to be approved by the select board. So that's the purpose of this agenda item. Does anyone on the board want to make a motion, Roger?
Yeah, I move that we approve the appointment of Erica Linsky to Recreation Director. Second.
Motion by Roger, second by Mike. Is there any further discussion on this? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I don't want to get in the way of the process. I guess I don't understand why this board is maintaining approval of an appointment of an employee. The state statutes are clear that the town manager hires and supervises and fires staff. I have no problem with the collaborative process, and we're just publicly stating that it's that you like the candidate. That's great, but I think you should say that and not say that you make a motion to approve the employees.
So the charter requires approval of government decisions.
The charter does not. Okay, I understand.
And it just says, quote, the municipal manager's appointment of department head shall be approved by the select board is the language in statute, and we approved the memo further clarifying it 2 meetings ago. Any other questions or comments on this agenda item? Okay, next up, we have update on municipal staffing, and I believe Tom has prepared a statement.
Sure, I'll make a few remarks, probably a little bit lengthy.
And Tom, please speak up for folks online and the recording. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll do my best. So we've had some turnover recently in the past few years, and let me step back a little bit. So when I began, the town, not the town, but EFUD had no water operators, or public works director was running the water plants. So at the start of my tenure, we hired 2 water operators with us today. The town, EFUD, not long before that, had similar turnover with sewer operators. So EFUD went through this before recently. So it's not dissimilar what's happened recently to what's happened not that many years ago. We've had a vacancy in recreation that is now filled. An individual is prepared to start very soon. We anticipate filling the deputy director position. In essence, as soon as the director is on, we've got large numbers of candidates for that job. I think it's a pretty attractive job. But we've got a large pool of ready and willing and able candidates. That position is going to be rewritten and restructured a bit to give it some additional work and oversight of some of the maintenance duties that we have at our facilities and our parks. But we're anticipating filling that very soon, and recreation be fully staffed and ready to go and start planning for the summer as job 1, which I think is by far the most important part of what that department does. Before we had vacancies in recreation, we had an after-school program that dwindled pretty dramatically. We worked with the library, try to send some of the after-school kids there to our rec, it was just not successful. But we hope to revitalize everything pretty quick. Looking at highway, for the past couple of years at highway, we've had 2 people go. One is filled with a permanent hire and one is filled with a temporary hire, and we think we'll have a permanent hire early in the spring. We're not filling it intentionally. It's just the wrong time of year to get someone to start plowing snow on day 1. We had an individual who left the library early this year. That person reports to the library director. That job was filled recently with an internal hire. So again, we had 1 vacancy there, but only because it was internally filled. We hope to fill that vacancy really quickly. The library director is in the hiring process already. Undoubtedly, the resignation of town clerk, pending retirement of deputy clerk, is going to be really tough to overcome. We have hired a different individual who has a couple decades of experience as a town clerk. So we have an in-house resource, and that person is pretty ready and willing to assist us as part of the transition. So having that deep bench is of a lot of value to us. We also have a temporary position. Leanne Deanne's helping us, and Leanne worked here for, I'll get the time wrong, but upwards of 30 years, it's my understanding. So Leanne is also here helping on some of the financial issues, which is great. So what if we had some turnover? We've had some turnover because of an action I recommended that the select board took. That action was related to health. And if I step back a little bit, in 2024 and prior years, the town paid for healthcare fundamentally in the way it does now. The town for a long time simply set the dollar amount that it would pay. Employees went and chose their plan. And if you look back in the data, you see some trends, and then most employees selected a bronze, which has the lowest premium and the highest deductible. So what that means is, and I can use myself as an example because I did this. So I'll use actually the math that applied to me. The town every month was putting about $700 in the health savings. The amount the town contributed to my health insurance, paid for my premium, was about $700 a month. My out-of-pocket maximum was about $14,000 a year. So in real rough numbers, I'm getting about $7 grand into my health savings account. I've got a risk of $14,000. So in a perfect year, I walk away with a lot of money in my HSA and I'm doing great. And in a bad year, I've got a liability, an out-of-pocket liability of $7,000 above and beyond what the town paid me. And if I looked at that, and I had a real problem with that, and I had a real problem from from two perspectives. First, it was a pretty expensive way to pay for healthcare for employees. And my concern in crafting the 2025 budget, which is really the same concern, quite frankly, I've always had, is I don't want the town to be stuck on this hamster wheel of health insurance. If you look at the recent news about schools, they're at 12%. And that's a starting number, and obviously that's gonna get changed in a lot of respects by school board actions in the legislature. But that's due to health insurance. If you look at Montpelier, and if you look at Morristown, their draft budgets are around 10%. That's just level funding services, and again, much of that is due to health insurance. And we are in a much better position because of the way health insurance changed. So what changed? The town now has every employee on a bronze plan, which has the lowest premium. We pay 100% of that premium. So that same big $14,000 deductible I mentioned is still there. Employees this year with a family plan, your deductible, your cost is $1,650 as a maximum. Anything beyond that is paid at 100% by the town. So you went from having a plan where you had a risk of $7,000 or a gain of $7,000 to the maximum risk of $1,650 and potentially no cost for health insurance. And I proposed that to the select board and the select board, and it was adopted because I looked at this from an equity lens, and I thought that two employees sitting next to each other doing the same work, but have pretty different financial outcomes in their personal lives with that plan structure. I think that plan structure worked great for a long time, but as health insurance for years and years picked up at 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation, it simply got to be, I think, unsustainable. And so I recommended that change. Now, that is the change that I think has caused some turmoil. That is the change that I think has caused people to unionize. And did I roll that out appropriately with enough foresight, with enough communication? Clearly not. 100%, but we wouldn't be having this conversation. And so I have to own that, but I still think that there's a lot of value in that change going forward. Because again, I think if we were not talking about that, we'd be in a different place from a lot of perspectives. So no matter the positives, obviously the rollout was poorly done on my part. I also want to talk about a couple of things though that I think we did really positively. That really we didn't talk about a lot in prior years. So the first is when I began, our employee handbook was, I don't know the exact date, but it was deadly. And so that was updated, and it was updated in a way that no one single employee had any benefits reduced. There were people that had, for instance, accrual rates of sick and vacation time, and they were much higher than people today get, including myself, but they were grandfathered in. Part of the handbook, we added holidays, we added a personal day, we added vision and dental plans, which have not been provided before. And again, no one suffered a loss of benefits. The other piece we added was we added an actual paid family medical leave policy. Not fully paid for a 12-week period, but there's potential for paid family medical leave for a portion. And the other piece we added was a clause about exigent circumstances. And what that says, really short, is that if you have a personal challenge in your life, you can approach the manager and you can cash out your accruals. Now, by law, if you've got vacation time on the books and you leave town employment, we have to pay you, but we do not pay you for sick. So this was an effective way to say, hey, I'm having a real challenge in my life. I need some cash. And if I've got sick time, especially, I can monetize that. When I talked to employees about this, the simple example I gave was, hey, if you call me and you say, look, I bought a truck, hard to make payments, my answer is, you bought a truck. It's not a crisis. It's something you did that you couldn't afford. But if you call me and you say, Tom, my septic went, I got a $20,000 bill, and it's almost Christmas. I want to cash out a few weeks of sick to put a down payment. The answer is likely to be yes. And so since that clause has been in place, a number of employees have approached me with problems like that. And those are confidential problems, but in every instance, the request was honored and honored in full. So I think that's been hugely beneficial. I also want to give a really quick update on bargaining and where we're at since we've now had, I don't know, 7, 8 months of bargaining, looking at Kenny Ryan in the back, who's on the EFA bargaining team, but quite a long time. So both the town and EFA have handshake agreements. So we are really close. We are simply at the time where we are editing the contract before it goes to a vote. And the editing takes quite a bit of time because the contract is 50, 60 pages with a lot of new language for all of us. And so we're simply working our time to get through that. I think at negotiations for the town, I've been joined by Tori, I've been joined by Kane. I think negotiations have actually been really, really successful and equitable. And respectful on everyone's part, and that's been great. And I think it makes everyone's life going forward much easier, because when I hire an employee, I simply will say, this is your rate of pay. And this is your rate of pay for the next several years, and this is your benefit. As an aside, one of the challenges I've had at times without a weakness is people will come to me for a raise, and if I give the raise, word gets around that the manager's giving raises, which sort of sucks. If I don't give a raise, word gets around and we us. So having a contract in some respects is a little bit easier for me. I'm actually welcoming that aspect in a big way. And I think having that contract gives us all some stability. Couple final things I want to say is that the budget for 2026, which we'll be discussing later, has some funding for HR assistance, about $20,000 for consultant. And some of that is for managers for assistance. Some of that is for real technical matters, because whether you're large or small, you get questions that you can't answer. And sometimes you need a third party help to get that done because you've got to put together things to do. So I think that's going to be useful for all of us, because we're not always equipped to answer questions when someone has a question about family medical leave, for instance, which has both a federal and state component to it. We need a little help for that. There are towns out there of similar sizes that have full-time HR staff. I'm not proposing that in 2026, but I think there's some capacity that's needed and would be welcome. Maybe that's a little bit overdue. So I guess I just want to say the last few years, we've had some HR challenges. We've made some corrections for disparities. We've filled some gaps. Absolutely, we've made mistakes. I've made some mistakes. I think I've learned from that. I think I'll keep learning from that. And I think I'm super optimistic that once we have a signed human contract, and again, I think we are awful close to that, that I think it's just going to lead to more clarity for everyone and easier and better decision making for everyone. So that's my statement. I think you need to come up with it. Okay.
We've been starting with the board, Ingrid, if that's okay. So I'm gonna ask the board questions or comments first, and then public questions or comments. That any board members have questions or comments. Mike?
I would like to hear from the public first.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Anyone else on the board have questions or comments? All right, thanks, Ingrid. Sorry to make you come up and then go back down again.
No, I just have one comment. Wanted to thank Mr. Likes for finally taking ownership for something that I think should have happened 13 months ago. And I appreciate that you told all the people in this room, but if I could make a suggestion, I think we should share what you told us to the employees. I think they deserve to hear what we just found out to. Amy?
Was a little longer. I too appreciate that you said something. So I do take the opportunity to speak. I am here to raise a concern as well. I think that the level and pace in which the staff turnover has happened in the town, it suggests that it's more than just a healthcare concern. It actually suggests leadership, and that includes this board. So when I I say that with the utmost respect, quite frankly, because this job is not easy. But it also speaks to the organizational stability and also risk associated with this. So when I think about members who have recently left, they have had institutional knowledge that cannot be quickly replaced regardless of the folks that are stepping in. So while as I said, healthcare plan may have contributed, I'm quite dubious that that's the main reason here. I think that it may have been a significant factor. And in a small town like ours, the staff continuity and that institutional knowledge cannot be underestimated. And what it takes to build that back. And that, I believe, is one of the biggest risks what's occurred here. Last 13 months, I should say. And with those, I'm a little concerned that we're actually going to get back to where we were. So I don't know if there's any option to entertain those that have recently left, having them. But I would advocate for that if that's possible. And it's also my understanding when I talk about the board, you folks were aware of this. And the piece I also want to mention here is having that brought to this public forum so that we're aware. So we shouldn't be catching up with what has been happening for 13 months, 15 months. And that to me is also a very important part because as you can imagine that we depend on effective government. We also depend on transparent government, honest government. With the good, bad, and the ugly. Without being aware of it, it makes it really hard for us to support those that we get. So I do appreciate that you made your statements tonight, and I echo Ingrid had just said, that I think the staff deserves to hear this as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I see Chris in the room, and then if anyone online, come on.
I ditto Amy's comments 1,000%. Hopefully these new guidelines will stop the massive bleeding. Because at the end of the day, if this continues, by default, it will end up impacting the taxpayers of the town and the residents of the town. In my eyes, that's simply unacceptable. So I have a question that I hope you can answer. This contract, the pay and benefits moving forward, how does that address performance-based and neglect on the employees' part to do their jobs properly? And is there any wording in there that, like most government entities, they help getting rid of a bad employee? And it seems like, unfortunately, after all the years of the way things have been done here, now we're stuck in a union and we're being dragged into that hole where getting rid of somebody may just be really impactful.
So I don't want to talk about our contract yet, because it's not yet public. But I guess what I'll say, Chris, is every union contract I've seen is really similar to our handbook. In terms of holding employees accountable, there's no secret there. So I wouldn't anticipate anything different in that respect.
Hope for the best.
Is there anyone online or other folks in the room with questions or comments?
Yes, I would like to say something.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle, and then Bill's getting up in the room.
I just want to say for the record that none of us left because of healthcare. We left because of Tom Lights.
Thanks, Michelle.
I appreciate how difficult this job is for all of you, and I don't think any of you believe that this has been success in terms of the turmoil that's going on. You know, Tom pointed out some things his statement a minute ago, which I applaud all of you and Tom for. You know, the handbook is something I never was able to get across the finish line, and 5 different elected boards at the time, the village was a full service municipality, and just trying to get that done, and when finally happened, it took it off the table. And then we're intending ourselves on reconstruction. With regard to the health insurance, the way that it was purely a monetary commitment by the town. And the memos that were sent out to the staff and employees every year said, we're no longer going to be able to keep up with medical inflation. Tom is absolutely right. There's no way that you can give 12 or 15% increases every year. And typically there was the calculation with regard to what the premiums were going up and what inflation was. And, if we didn't just split the difference in some years when medical inflation was higher and real inflation was higher, maybe we got 6 or 7%. In other years, we got 2 or 3%, but it was simply a number. And if it got to the point that it was $700 a month, that could have been adjusted by just saying, we're not going to give you any increase. But that's beside the point. I said a year ago when this was proposed, the plan that Tom proposed, that it was a pretty decent plan. And if you didn't have health insurance, it was a good plan. And I think capping people's maximum out-of-pocket expenditure was fine. But it allowed the employees to determine what kind of plan was best for their families. And I think that was the element of it that a lot of people rated that. And clearly, if everybody was taking the bronze plan by the time last year came around, maybe that's no big deal. But when I was here, there were only 3 or 4 people taking a bronze plan, and many were taking gold or platinum plans. I'd like to point out my concern, and I'm talking just as a taxpayer now, is I hear a lot. I had a conversation with Mike the other day, and I know that I appreciate you listening to me. You talked to me for a good long time on the phone. And I hear from Mike a lot about fiscal conservatism, which I think we're all interested in, keeping costs down. It costs money to change employees, a lot of it. You lose institutional memory, you lose people that know how to do the job. And I've been around municipal government long enough to know that when somebody resigns a position, it's oftentimes the only way the person in that position gets raised. The new people come in at a higher rate than the old employees. And I would suggest, I don't know this at all, but my guess is that employees that have gone out the door are being replaced with employees who are getting paid more. So that's coming out of our pockets as well. The final thing I want to say, and you might not appreciate this, but there's been a person missing from the front office staff for months now. That work. You can argue about whether or not that person was the most energetic employer or not, but that employee did a lot of work. They took payments, they inputted payments into the system, tax bills, water, sewer bills, zoning fees, recreation fees. They did a lot of things. They answered the phone, they met with the public, they made bank deposits. All that work is still happening. And I'm not sure if the people that are doing that extra work have been rewarded at all for it. And if they haven't, we should figure out how to do that, because the work is still getting done, and on a day-to-day basis, they're trying to do their own jobs and someone else's too. And if that hasn't been given consideration by the manager or the board, I think it might be. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from the public comments?
Hey, Alyssa, it's Elizabeth Brown. I can't quite figure out how to raise my hand. Could I speak for a moment?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. I just echo Amy's thoughts earlier. It's a small town. Rumors have been getting around for quite some time. I think what Michelle said was extremely brave. When you're dealing with 15 to 20% attrition in an organization, there's a much bigger systemic problem. And I'm sure you're covering it in executive session, but you owe it to the public to let them know what is really going on here and deal with the leadership issues.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Anyone else on the public? No?
Elizabeth largely captured, I think, I don't need to dogpile on you, Tom, I just mean, we've heard a couple comments about systemic issues or things that go beyond the healthcare. I think I'm curious what the board has experienced in terms of fielding concerns from town employees and what that process is like. I think just generally in these kind of structures, there should be a concern reporting process, and I'm curious if the town and the select board has a process to deal with concerns before they turn into potentially bigger issues. Yeah, so I'm curious what that process looks like and if that process has been engaged. And generally echoing a call for transparency and, you know, making sure that I agree. I think Michelle was like very brave to speak up like that in a public setting in a small town. And generally speaking up about your employer at all can be very nerve-wracking. So I'll just echo that. Yeah, if there's a process, I'd be curious. We don't have a process. I think we should have a process. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. Teresa?
Thank you. I just want to make a brief comment that maybe is a little bit different than what other folks have been making. And I think that one of the things that I guess I want to acknowledge that in a systems change that our municipality is going through and has been through for the last couple of years, it's extremely difficult in an organization to change leadership when we have had the same leader for decades. I don't know any of the details of all the stuff that's happened and other things that will happen, but I think we need to keep in mind that anybody coming into an organization, and this is municipality as an organization that has had the same leader for many decades, is going to have a difficult time in transition. And at the same time, we had quite a bit of turnover in our select board. And I think that as community members, what I would like to do is to support us through this transition and have some degree of understanding of the difficulty, at the same time recognize the issues that our staff have had. So I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Teresa. Other comments? Mike, I think you wanted to speak after the public, if you're ready.
Thank you all for your comments. I really do appreciate that. Extremely supportive, and I can always speak for myself, and I hope I speak also for my fellow select members. I think transparency, and pardon me, I was Santa yesterday and speaking to too many kids, of course, it's really scary. I do believe in transparency and being very open. We do hear from the town manager. I'm not naive. I do know sometimes some employees are not happy with every decision. I do believe they need to have explanations for what's happening. But I don't believe, I never heard specifically from one employee, and maybe the other select board members did hear directly. I did not hear some of the things that we're hearing. I know, as much as I respect the police's periodical or roundabout, I think it's created the article that came out, it's created a little bit of a hornet's nest. I do know we've had some changes, and some of them, I don't think it's every one of the changes are in regards to issues. I think some people left for different reasons, some people left for promotions, and other places. People are gonna do that, but I know I need to hear from employees if there's real issues. And I do not hear those issues directly. Maybe the other select board members did. But I didn't hear, and I did see some changes in behavior from some of the staff after different things happened. But no one's come to me, and I can't speak to the other select board members. You know, I did speak a number of times to the town manager about what's going on. So I want to know. I think we owe it to our town employees. And to be quite honest, I think in a lot of ways, the compensation that our town staff receives is fairly good. I think if we've seen town staff leave for $1 or $2 difference in per hour wages, they don't look at what some of the benefits that they have. They look specifically at what they have per hour. But I think I'm not a huge union person, but I'm not against unions. I'm hoping that with the unions, we can have some frank discussions on issues such as this, get them on the table, deal with them. But I can't do anything if I'm not aware personally on what people are upset about. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Roger?
Could I say something about what Mike just said?
Sure.
Mike, you and the rest of the select board have gotten an email from me November of 2024 and August of this year, and you have yet to call me, come into my office when I was still working there, or even replied back to my email. So you cannot say that you did not know what was going on.
I'm not saying that have not been some group events, but typically, I know usually in those group emails to select board members are a lot of times handled by the chair. And if you had a real concern, I'm still old school. I like talking to people. I don't like emails and text, even though I can deal with them. But I want to look you in the eye and face to face say, what's the problem? And I just wasn't hearing that from a lot of them. I know I didn't hear that from you, Michelle. And I would have.
I have your phone number. I will call you later
So
tonight or
I'm the
tomorrow.
chair, and I don't want to have a public dialogue. I think this has been very productive. I'm happy to have folks comment. Michelle, we heard your comment. Mike, did you hear? Michelle, do you have other follow-up? And then if not, Roger was.
My last thing is I'm going to give Mike a call if he wants to talk in person.
Thank you, Michelle. Roger.
I'd like to just state that we're all human. We make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes as chair of this organization. And I'll continue to make mistakes as just a member of the select board. And I apologize for those mistakes that I've made. I also recognize that our town manager has made mistakes, and I feel like we've addressed those with him in confidence, which I think is the appropriate way to deal with it. Something like that.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, listen, I get one last statement. And I'll be the first to admit that I made many mistakes. You're right, it happens. I mean, I think this has been helpful. I'd just like to say to you, Mike, though, that Alyssa's article, Lisa's article did not cause the hornet's nest. The hornet's nest has been buzzing for a long time and she's reported, so.
Any other questions?
Yeah, would you just come up, right?
Yeah, sure.
Everyone else too, thank you.
Terrific question. As employees, if there are concerns, who do we go to? I have been told I cannot go to the select board.
You first go to me,
Okay.
and if they're not addressed by me, then I think it's.
What if it is about you?
Well, if it's something I can correct, I'm happy to have a conversation with you. If it's, but you can always go to the select board.
Okay.
I don't know who you go to.
I have a few people say you don't go to the select board, and my question has always been. What if I have a problem? And what if Tom can't help me? Who do I go above that? Oh, don't go to the select board. Pardon? Oh,
And when there's a union contract, there's a grievance process that's really related to. The grievance said that. If there's a grievance of a union contract, typically that's pertaining to the contract not being followed. But you're the first person you can approach with the problem is me, if that,
right.
if there's not a solution or not a solution I can give. Then you can go to the chair of the select board next, I think it's perfectly appropriate,
Thank you.
but you can always go to me and start there.
Thank you. Other questions? I'll just say, speaking as an individual who is currently chair of the select board, I took this role on in January. It didn't come with a handbook or a handoff of resources. It came in the middle of changing personnel on the select board and the town office. I've served on the board for 4 years. Besides Mike, Roger, and I was second longest serving. And I'll say, speaking for myself, I'm doing my best to serve the town, and that doesn't mean you do everything perfectly. And it's really challenging when you don't have support, when you have a variety of other resources, and when you're trying to respect that despite claims about transparency, we do all of our business in public. We do the business of the town in public, and we want to be fair and respectful of all of the municipal employees and seek guidance around the best way to do it. And it doesn't mean we always get it right. But I'll say, speaking for myself, that's what I'm endeavoring to do. Is there any other questions or comments? Our next item is flood mitigation updates and community development block grant disaster recovery or CDBG-DR awards. And we have some updates on that pertaining to Waterbury. Tom, is it open by ten over you?
Yes. So we received, announcement was a week or two ago, we received 2 grants. One for what we call the Woody Avenue project, that was a planning grant for $300,000, and we received an implementation grant for Randall Meadow of $2 million. The budget submitted for Randall Meadow was about 4.3 million. So I've got to get some more detail from the state, but the challenge with the Randall Meadow project is there's a requirement that you really provide proof of funding for the project. And sometimes you apply for a grant and proof of funding is a letter that says, in essence, yeah, give us a little time, we'll come up with a match. This one is stronger and really from my initial research, I suspect we are working towards a bond vote. And the proof of funding for the state, they want to see pretty soon, they want to see by the spring. So I'll have more detail for the next meeting, and there is plenty of time to get a bond vote before the public. But it appears to me that we're marching towards, a public conversation and a question about what may come here. So one option would be to bond for the difference in expected project costs. We're also pursuing other grants. Any bond vote has a public question that accounts for that. So in essence, it might say something like, shall the town of Waterbury issue general obligation bonds for 2.3 million, subject to reduction due to receipt of other funds. And that's a very typical way a bond vote is worded. The other option for this project, which I don't have an answer to right now, would be to reduce the scope to be within the $2 million. Fundamentally, though, this is about moving soil and creating flood storage. And so I think if you reduce the scope that dramatically, you've done all the planning and engineering and spent a lot of money for that, but you haven't actually completed the project as envisioned. You're going to get, no, I don't want to say pennies on the dollar. I want to say inches on the foot of flood relief. So I think, again, I think at this point, I don't have enough information for a select board recommendation, but it really feels to me like a bond vote is so likely going to be the recommended course of action to consider in a few weeks. The other piece to consider pertaining to a bond vote is how you pay for it. Any bond vote will have general language that this will be general obligation bonds for the town. That does not mean you have to necessarily raise taxes to pay for it. You could issue debt and pay for the debt through the local option tax. So there's a second lever that, again, the local option tax lets you pull to pay for this. The other piece I'd say is, despite interest rates being higher, the town could still issue 20-year debt at 3.5%. So interest rates are pretty good for us. And they've been so for a long time, not quite as good as they were 5-10 years ago, but still awfully good. And so there's some work I've got to do before the next meeting to figure out a plan and specifics, but it really feels like there's some pressure from the state to say you're going to live within a $2 million grant, or you're going to, if you're going to do more than that, you've got to provide proof of funding. And it's not the letter from the manager saying, we'll figure it out as we go. It's a bit more than that. So that's my update. The other piece I wanted to say about these projects is, again, there's pretty healthy budgets within those projects to hire professionals to help steer them. Right? So one of our big challenges, one of my huge challenges the past few years is we've had 3 floods, but we haven't had consulting help to manage the FEMA claims. That's just really fallen on me, but now we'll have consulting help to manage our grant awards, which will be really valued by me, among some others. So that's my general update.
Thanks, Tom. Questions and comments from the board? It looks like Roger has one.
Tom, it sounded as though there's some reason to hope for clean water grant funding. Could you address that just briefly?
Yep. So there's funding available through the state. It's administered by Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. I've had to become, with this and 5 other funding sources, a bit of an on-the-fly expert. It's called QUIS, Clean Water Service Provider. And those funds are about phosphorus reduction. When I initially was briefed from that program, I had assumed that the phosphorus reduction was because we're taking phosphorus-laden soils out of the floodplain. It's not. It's because we're creating new floodplain which will capture more phosphorus in the future. And from what I've learned, it's a pretty complex calculation to determine how much phosphorus is captured. So in talking to Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission about that grant, it seems like, hey, we're a no-brainer. You can do a big project here in Waterbury and meet the phosphorus goals for the movement and not administer 100 projects involving culverts in 50 towns. The answer is it's more complex than that. And the folks at Central Vermont Regional Planning have said to us, our project could well be a really good fit, but the challenge is until we're fully engineered and designed, they can't really do the phosphorus reduction calculations. And we can certainly do it off our preliminary design, but their fear is they're gonna allocate us a grant, the design will change along the way, and we won't get the phosphorus reduction. And so they really want us to be fully engineered. Under any scenario, whether there's a town bond vote that's successful, or there's not even select board support to go forward with one, but under any scenario, the $2 million grant we have allows us to be fully engineered and designed. And so we will be in a pretty good position once that work is done to get these clean water service provider funds. It's just gonna take a little while to get it. So we've got a big grant. There's still an awful lot of work to get to the finish line. In fact, we're not quite at the start line, I would argue. We probably have 3 months of environmental reviews to even get there. We probably have a few months until we have a grant contract in front of us. So still an awful lot to do here. But getting $2 million is never a bad start.
And how long until the engineer?
I don't know, in part because I don't know if we can spend funds in advance of the grant. Sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. I've gotta learn that. That's one of my first questions. Rough guess, I would say 12 months, perhaps 15 to 18. It's still a long lead time in front of us.
Can you maybe repeat that last sentence or tell me if it answered the question? I'm curious about funding timelines, especially in an era of federal uncertainty. If this is funding at the state that's being subgranted to us, when do we know about if and how we access funds? Is it reimbursement? Do we have any of that?
I don't know the details yet. I can 100% guarantee it's reimbursement. It always is.
Have we received any updates on timing other than the award announcement?
And I'm hoping that more before the next meeting.
Any other board questions or comments, Kate?
Say we're fully engineered in 18 months. Is that request a bond vote we can haul dirt?
No, the grant requires proof of funding essentially by the middle of March. And so the bond vote could occur this year. You don't need to issue the debt until you need it. So our debt goes through the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank. Typically, conservatively at this time, they issue that twice a year. And it's not that difficult to process. So we would not issue until we're, I would guess we wouldn't issue until we're pretty well into the original grant.
And what do you think? What do you think with being awarded this grant? What do you ballpark our full timeline should have bond vote passed?
From completing the project.
Like completion of the project.
I'd say 3 to 4 years to complete it. And part of that is that when you get to the bid stage, the timing is really important. So if you complete everything and you're ready to bid in July, it's not the right time of year necessarily. May not matter a lot for this project, or the engineers will know that. But so often the timing of the bid is really the, what impacts you. I'll give you an example on an E-flood project. We're building a water line for a few $1 million, and that is going out to bid January 2nd and 3rd to just the time the market right. So sometimes that matters, not in a big way. So if you're fully engineered and complete things, but it's October, you're probably not going to put it out to bid for a little bit.
Other questions or comments from the board?
Another follow-up is, given another ballpark. Just as a reminder. How many inches of water are we trying to take off?
As much as we can, the very basic design we have says up to a foot in a typical 100-year flood, and that foot of flood relief is essentially all of South Main Street. So really think Randall and Elm Main Street all the way down to the bridge. So it's essentially as a mile of stream from almost a mile from that area. So it's pretty all encompassing. And then think about also, there's areas of South Main Street that are pretty far away from those neighborhoods, but nonetheless have flooding problems if for no other reason because the storm surge back up. So that foot of flood relief also addresses some of those pressures. So it's pretty meaningful for not just Randall now, but all of South Main. Or at least I think the foot up to a foot is pretty meaningful.
Questions or comments from the public on this? Yeah. I was curious with this Randall Meadow project, when we had the sort of flood visioning community project, thinking about, you know, flood resilience as a town, one of the things that we had talked about was like, after, like, basically rewilding that Randall Meadow area, and potentially doing like a boardwalk project or some sort of interesting community path project. Would something like that have to be factored into the design of it, or is that kind of a secondary thing where once we pull out some dirt, then we can do whatever we want with it?
So the budget we submitted has, I don't know the dollar amount offhand, but it is well into the six figures for things like replanting afterwards. So that's already envisioned as part of it. We're also working with the National Park Service, and I'm hoping someone can give me the acronym or the program name, but it's a program through the National Park Service where they have landscape architects, design experts, people like that, and they are doing some conceptual planning with us, and there's a pretty large group involved already to try to think about those questions.
Okay.
So that's already underway.
Cool. Are there like, is it possible to get follow-on grant for those kind of projects, or is that not really allowed with this grant?
I think that's part of the reason why we're working with National Park Service is to put ourselves in line for future fundings. But you know, I said a minute ago, I think we're 3 to 4 years away from construction, and I think this is phase 2.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that's rec trails program, RTP, and I think it's or definitely.
It's the National Park Service's Rivers, Trails and Conservation Assistance Program.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, please?
Question. Can you repeat what, or let us know again what monies from, I want to say, is it 325 from the local options tax that we're already committed for?
So there'll be an update on that and
Other questions, matters?
Yeah, just a question about the Woody Avenue part. You'll see that later, but I just wanted to get your sense of the timeline where we're headed with that one.
I think as soon as we get clarity in the grant, we'll start putting the work out to bid and hire consultants. So pretty quick. That's a planning grant, so I'm hoping that will be wrapped up in, you know, more than 18-month time frame.
The result of that would be
The result of Woody Avenue, at least in my mind, would be a project that has been vetted by the Selectboard and the public. So that project will go out to bid, unlike Stanley Watson, where we're saying to the community, tell us, here's our broad guidelines, you tell us what we can do. Woody Avenue would be, this is exactly what we want. You give us your best price. So within that grant, we've got dollars for consultant help with the public assistance process. It's part of that.
that we don't have any real sense of how many housing units we're considering on this work.
I think we've all got our own ideas there. I don't want to.
Yeah, do you want to hear my dream?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more of a Walmart supercenter and not houses, but that's just my idea.
Let the record reflect the manager was using sarcasm.
That was humor, for those of you that didn't catch it.
I think the key to that project is to go through that exercise with the community to try to get a good sense of what's the appropriate fit. And then Gary's about to raise his hand. I guarantee he's going to say something about getting fire trucks up that road.
100%. It just, I'm curious, and I'm not opposed to housing. I have one, so I'm good, and I get it that people don't. But I live up that way, and I can tell you that today, it took me a while to get home. Because of the way the parking is on High Street. And this has been going on for years. I've been complaining about it for years. And the board, not just your folks, but the board, quite some time has been hands off. There's no means of enforcement for the people that park there. That's a problem. I got up through there with my pickup. I can tell you that there's no way we would have gotten any of the other fire trucks up through there, or possibly an ambulance today during the school let up. People are showing up at the school an hour earlier now. And this is a problem. And if you put housing there, again, I'm not opposed to housing, but you've got to have a means for people to get in and out. And part of what we should be looking at, aside from the housing, is the quality of life that it impacts on everybody else. And if people can't get home or leave their house, that's a serious problem.
Is this happening, just because, I'm sorry, trampling over, procedure here, but, is it just when people are picking up and dropping off their kids, or is it like throughout the school day? Or what is the?
No, it is, the worst part is at school pickup time. Cars start pulling up into the yard at about 1:45. And then it filters out onto Stowe Street. And then it goes up High Street. And today it was going down Union Street. So it seems like every month, the number of people that pick up their kids grows. So I had to wait on Stowe Street, on Union Street to get up through because there's traffic cars parked on both sides. So that means it's a one-lane road.
Gary, can I say, I think we hear you. I think we're talking to design or
No, I
something.
did a-
No, I'm
some
very
detail, I think.
registering. I think Cheryl's doing our notes that this is a major concern and needs to be part of the plan. We have 3 figures of funding for planning, which is a lot more than we had before.
Certainly. I hear what you're saying.
Right, but the same people don't.
All right, I'm sorry. I understand, but I've been complaining about this for years, and it's fallen on deaf ears. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Other board questions or comments?
Let's add a discussion about parking on High Street to our next agenda.
Other questions? Thank you. Evan's next, and I would just make a comment on my own behalf that I think it is the next opportunity for us to start from the beginning and be open and clear about this planning. For the point of, we learn by doing these things. I'm excited for this opportunity to be upfront about what we're planning, what we're considering, who's being involved. From Jeff. And
Just a quick comment, it was in the news this past week that the BRICS grant program is back on. I know that the town is considering that for, I forget exactly which project, but it was something you were considering applying for. That you didn't know about it yet, and you don't know it. So currently, we'll see what it says on the office.
We had submitted a brick grant. I don't want to speculate on timing, a while back. And just after we submitted our grant application, well before it was even reviewed, the program was killed. So, yeah, maybe it's worth another try in that grant. As I recall, did include money for Randall Meadow.
166,000.
any other questions or comments on this? Right, as one of my jobs I've inherited as chair, I'm noting we have quite a robust agenda and a number of folks here, so I'm going to encourage us to move on. Next up, we have Stanley Wasson update. Don't know that we have a public update. I'll say, speaking for myself as chair, I know we've received questions about process. Say, I've been a bottleneck holding this up. Tom, to his credit, drafted responses, I think 2 weeks ago. And I said, I have some questions about some of the language in this, and he still has not received an answer from me. So I'll say that publicly. But Tom, I welcome any other updates, but wanted to clear that that's something I'm holding.
Just to say that the executive session for real estate is about Stanley Lawson. And we're still working on what I'm calling the pre-development agreement. So we hope to, get that finalized pretty soon. I doubt it'll be this year, but I'm hoping the first meeting in January, we can be pretty close on that. And then that'll be a public document pretty soon.
Will that go with the executive session, or can we discuss it here? We got our freedom of information request from an individual in the coalition requesting a bunch of information.
Yeah, Alyssa just referred to that.
Right.
So. Now we're still finalizing that response. I think we're pretty close.
So it's in the works.
It's in the works, and I think. One of the challenges I will say, and I can talk about this during the 2026 budget, is. When we respond to something, a freedom of information request. To the person making the request, it may seem that it's an easy response on our part, but it's something that we want to weigh our words carefully. It oftentimes requires legal input. It's pretty easy when a freedom of information request comes in and it says, give me a copy of your audit, just send it along. So it takes a little bit of time sometimes.
So we're with it, but happy job.
Other questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the board? I don't see any in the room. Is there anyone online? Okay. Seeing none, I will move us on to our next item, which is continued budget review and discussion, including free bullets, municipal department budgets, commission and committee budget requests, re-review of local option tax spending proposal. I am facilitating in real time based on who I see in the room. Things I'm aware of is our fire chief, Gary Dillon, who's I yelled at him loudly earlier, so he's present in the room for the fire department budget. Thank you, chief. I know we need to review Parks and Rec, but Tom is our only staff for that. Amy Marshall Carney, I believe, is here from Conservation Commission. Cheryl Casey is here from the 250th Anniversary Commission. We have some sheriffs here who were included in our local option tax spending proposal. Is there anyone else in the audience, in the room or online who would like to speak so we can work to have those folks speak first? Okay. Tom, do you have advice or input on the order with which we do this?
I'd like to do the local option tax first.
Okay, so starting from the bottom, let's go with re-review local options.
And I realized I might not have put that in the printed packet, but Cheryl, if I can screen share, got it right here.
Yeah, can you not screen share?
I should be. So hopefully folks can see that online. I've just added a new column.
A little, like press it just a little. And this is posted, just to be clear. We've seen LOT 12/15/2025 under related.
And we've had in the initial proposal, the county sheriff. And $75,000 towards that remains in here, so if the sheriff would like to come up, I think that'd be a great start. And to be clear, the correspondence I had with the sheriff was a 9-month program, so we'd start roughly in July and end at the end of March. And so there's to be a town meeting day vote in 2027, where people will be pretty well informed about how the services are working for us. And then again, from my perspective, the concerns I hear from residents about policing generally fall into the category of I guess I would call them retail policing. There's speeding concerns, which are really persistent and consistent, especially in Waterbury Center. But then there's also, I think, a general desire to see officers on occasion downtown on the beat and popping into cold problem and places like that. And so that's what I tend to hear. And that's the sheriff came and presented to us earlier in the year and talked about some of those things. And so that's why I proposed the funding. And again, to remind people who might not have heard the earlier conversation, when the town signs a contract with the sheriff, unlike the state police where we pay for 2 troopers and they might not always be in Waterbury or they might be out sick, we pay for hours on the ground in Waterbury. Period. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to the sheriff to.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here again. Just as a reminder, I'm Mark Poole, I'm the Washington County Sheriff. With me is Captain Brett Meyer, my second in command, otherwise known as the Chief Deputy, who is in charge of our patrol division within the department. So he has prepped, just for your information, our statistics here in the town of Waterbury up to this point this year, from January 1st to 25 until today. I think you're right. So all the services we provided that are in these statistics were free to the town of Waterbury. This was all done on our grant programs. We're not here a lot, but this was free of charge thanks to the feds. So with that being said, I guess the Brett can speak to some of this. And it really comes down to what are your questions, picking up from where we left off at the last meeting, whatever's come up since then. And that being said, Captain Meyer.
We're gonna say it's forum, regards to questions. Obviously, we're here to help. That's what we're here for. We're looking to help out and see what we can do to work in collaboration with the state police. And I spoke to the one of the local troopers the other night, and basically, are you taking over the whole contract? And this can't say. It's pretty clear that what level and where we can go will be part of the discussion, and I think what you're hitting on huge is quality. Motor vehicle enforcement obviously is one of the 2 things we do. But as far as the quality of life, this is very similar to the police of Warren contract. And what we do over there is getting out, getting around businesses, getting in contact with people, and certain levels of where we go and what we do versus what the state police would think about. And part of that is you just come up with like we came up with for a figure for 9 months. A large investigation might take that figure and eat that up pretty quick. So that's why we have organization of the state police to where they deal with certain levels of say crashes or criminal investigations to where we're not meeting your budget. So with that same organization of the state police would continue and be able to do somewhere to here, at least to start to get things organized.
Thank you very much. Does the board have questions or comments? Roger?
Could you tell us, what you would be able to do with that $75,000 figure for the, was it 9 months there? Year?
So what it really comes down to is we would ask your direction of what do you want us to do? And then we basically create our shifts around it and our shifts and staffing around what do you want us to do? When do you want us to do it? We can't always hit it right on the nose. But if you want somebody these days a week between these times or these days a week or do whatever you want, we can tailor it kind of custom made to what Waterbury is looking for.
We posted some of the budget put some time ago as far as hours and mileage, etc. per shift. I didn't find a copy of that today, so I apologize. I can't vote, but we kind of did some of the project to give you guys an idea of what it costs per shift. And how we want to work at it from there.
There's no easy answer to your question, but it's very flexible. It's not fixed in any way or form. You're not paying for this officer 24/7. If they're here, they're being paid. If they're not here, it doesn't cost you a dime.
So one thing I do want to get on, as far as we kind of work the way with all the other towns. So let's say if something serious going on in another town, I'm not saying another county, but another town, we're probably going to be assisting in that town and then just clearing and coming back to Waterbury. So I want you to know that we can let's say if we're in Wakefield and something's happening in Traceman, emergency call or first responder, we're gonna go. State police will be responding out. So that's the type of agreement we have through all the towns in this part of the time as well, just so you're aware of that, you know, that answer.
One hand washes the other.
No, I get that, but to say point, we would pay for services provided to Waterbury under this contract.
That is rare. It's an hourly rate. Plus mileage.
Other board questions, Mike?
First of all, thank you for your service and there is about I know what's a really big concern that we see is in the center, the area like Cold Hollow. Especially during the summer months, it becomes a mess with events and stuff like that. How do you see yourselves helping the traffic, you know, and a lot of issues that are occurring in that area?
There's gonna be more design about what the hours are, one hour, that's the easiest way to write it, but on the other hand. A lot of times, people don't hear it. Traffic has to work itself out.
I understand.
Us getting out, putting on blue lights, stopping and trying to direct traffic, sometimes makes things worse. But with that said, if, let's say, for instance, Full Hollow is trying to empty out. It would not be uncommon. I can remember when I worked down here, we used to have a lot of concerts. Out in Stowe, up in the valley, and I can tell you many times in the back there, or the bottom of 100. I am good myself, thank you. North Main and 100 directing traffic, you gotta go. You do get going versus you having to come to a stop and get back on. The minute it comes to a stop, that's when it starts backing up, sorry. So that is very, very common. So I could see us doing that again in certain instances.
It's becoming, even in this day and age with GPS and whatnot with Google. Google basically sends you down uphill road and we create other problems.
A lot of it has to be just situational, because every day on Route 100, it's different. We're used to it.
Kane, you had a question?
Yeah. You performed 106 traffic stops just passing through Waterbury.
No, basically we have highway safety money. We're trying to pick different areas, high flag areas, and then that problem very, you know, test with this high crash it. But they respond to many crashes. So anyways, we kind of enforcement in the area, trying to solve crashes.
That's quicker to take it, those DUI controllers, there's distracted guy, there's all great.
Yeah, literally, I spent pretty well the entire shift down here last Friday.
We try to help already, so. All the towns in the county get into touch, fix it, that has to be done.
Tori had a question.
You said just now that like every day on Route 100 is sick. So if we, I know you said that if we go forward with this contract, we would help, you know, work with you to create a schedule, but if we say like, hey, these are really like the problem things you have, do you have data that you can advise us of like, oh, if you're worried about X, we should probably be on
Absolutely, I think we talked about it at the last meeting, we recently got a grant for, it looks like a portable sign message board, you know, that pops up, but it also has a speed measuring device built into it. And we could track things along with that, it's not a license plate readers, none of that kind of stuff, it just takes speed data. So with a lot of our other contract towns, we're putting in the different complaint problems. You as townspeople or we out there on the street see it's a problem. We bring the signboard there and get our data of exactly what time is the problem. Sometimes what cars are the problem, it's the same time every single day, we start to figure this out. So we do as much data driven stuff as we can based on whatever you say or we discover ourselves. Absolutely, we'll do what we can.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Chris?
Just a comment there, I'm not sure that that it's advisable to spend too much of this $75,000 appropriation on other. I think our concern is more internal aspects of the town. Route 100, in my opinion, is state problem and quite honestly, Cold Hollow cider mills problem. They should be footing the bill to have their traffic control that they're facilitating. That's.
I'll just throw this out there. We have a contract with another town that Route 2 happens to travel through. And well, Route 2 is a really easy target because there's a lot of problems there. We specifically are told that don't spend much time on Route 2 because people want you in rural sections. So that precedent is set, but again, we take whatever direction the select board or the town manager, whatever our point of contact gives.
Thank you very much. Does the board have other questions or considerations? Again, right now, this is in a proposed local option tax spending that would be to go to voters at town meeting. And then again, would be for 9 months. So if we revisit it again in the future. The other project.
I just wanted to recognize that Cold Hollow side actually does pay for some traffic control during those high volume sessions.
Tom, other things you wanted to cover with these gentlemen that are here?
Just one question. To the contract, how do you want, what's the most appropriate way for the town to funnel information to you? Is that all through me? Is that, where should we create an email address where you email,
Whoever you want to make it a point of contact, and we actually like a point of contact, and so 10 different people calling in, it just works much better. And that either maybe you, member of the select board, or somebody from the town office. And what we'll probably end up doing is organizing to 50 sent by the email. That way we have documentation, you have most of them, so we make one deal, one cities, et cetera, to be able to use and follow up.
Last follow up. So when it comes to traffic enforcement, would you be in the business of issuing tickets for like municipal parking violations, or is that?
I overheard the other complaints here is, having worked at the PD, there's a lot of complaints and a lot of things in mission, many moons ago. I mean, when I was out of town on the shift, I was in the mission, the tickets and following the records.
Where's the money go for those tickets?
Depends on which ticket actually you speak to.
It depends on which ticket it is. You said from their state fines, or strictly state fines, goes back to the state of Vermont. Your local fines, a certain percentage comes to you. And then I have to relook at the ordinances. I believe your ordinances cover Route 100 as well. So a certain percentage of the money on state roads, if the ordinance is written properly, you will get a certain amount of money. I will let you know, as we discussed in the first meeting, was most violations for a better point of view is depending on how things go, we work with you. Either having to do points and roll the fines. That was something that was brought up in the legislature back in 2016, and having all the courts sometimes deal with people so they can deal with their fines. So again, I just putting people on your suspension for not dealing with other fines. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Oh, sorry, Lisa, you're something. Hi.
Lisa's going to the water on that. You mentioned the grant funding that you had to do these different, or to get DUI controls, that sort of thing. If you had a contract to do services, or however, would those services still happen, or would you do looks?
Yes, absolutely. We cover all the towns with everything.
Okay.
All right, call the brains.
Thank you.
All right, ready. Thank you very much for joining us for our long and robust municipal meeting, and we appreciate you taking the time to be here.
You have all our contact information, so any follow-up questions for Steve?
Thank you very much.
Make sure to keep up.
Have a very bad power issue. Okay.
Need to plug in.
Yeah. Tom's gonna take the owl, so. Yep.
we're good.
Oh, sorry, this one too.
All right, here we go. There went the meeting. No? Well, I don't know. There I went from the meeting. Sorry.
Okay. It's okay. So we're gonna reverse vote.
Yep.
We want Sharon, Jay. You want Sharon?
Okay, Town of Waterbury, I see a green box, so hopefully you all have your drums and are ready to continue. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so Tom, we currently are looking at local option tax. Is there other items you'd like to review here tonight before we move on?
Yep, just the proposed changes in column D. So the December 1st meeting, line 18, had some money in there for some payroll and AP sheet software changes, and that's been removed. The thinking is let's focus on the rental registry and make sure that software is performing as we want it to. Line 20, I added some money for FEMA buyout projects because those take some resources to advance. On the one hand, it's a little bit difficult because we're proposing to spend money to reduce our grant list. But sometimes those projects come with some challenges that are really hard to work through. And without local resources, you can sometimes work through them, but it's a much longer process. Sometimes having a little bit of money to advance them, I think is going to advance them a lot quicker. And FEMA has been a real holdup throughout this. I hate that FEMA take all on the project and we're still not ready in our end. So I think this would help in some respects. Sorry, let me step back. Line 16, I missed the big one. So line 16, Randall Meadow, that number was reduced dramatically from $325,000 to $10,000, and the $10,000 is, I think, sufficient. That is a small amount of money to keep advancing the project. Anytime you have a grant, there's always some restrictions. There are always some project costs that are not paid for by the grant, even though you try to write a really comprehensive application. And so the thought was to have a little bit of money to advance the project in the event it's needed. And sometimes that can also help in the timeline. Going down further to 21, which is another big change, the select board had indicated some support for sidewalks. I don't have a proposed section of sidewalks that we would do. I want to spend some time with the public works director to fine tune where exactly we do that. He has some areas where he noted on December 1st that our sidewalks are 4 feet when ADA is 5 feet, and we'd like to upgrade those. I think we all know High Street also is in pretty rough shape, and so that's a pretty high priority. But $150,000 gets started on sidewalks. In the past, we've done some sidewalk work with staff or a combination of staff and contractors. I suspect, given the gravel budget, that this will be contracted out more or less in full. Again, a little more to come on what detail. And then a couple other ideas that would help. Line 21 is a new one. The town in 2023, I believe, approved purchase of a public works vehicle, and we issued debt through a local bank, which was the loan bidder. And so this would pay that debt off in advance, that cuts about $35,000 out of the 2026 budget. And saves 13.4 in long-term interest. On that second line, 23, I did talk about before, and I had this in a different part. There's $65,000 left to pay off in the fire tower truck. That's a payment to ourselves through the town's tax stabilization fund. So we'd be literally cutting a check to ourselves, but that $65,000 gets back into that fund and gets invested. And then the other change is line 24 for the town plan. Talking to staff a little bit more, we talked to the chair of the planning commission. We have $50,000 this year for the town plan. We have a consultant contract for about $49,999. So far, our planning director is managing that contract, and there's been no change in that budget or contract. But nonetheless, there's a lot of work to do to finish up the town plan, and so we think having pressure relief valve makes a lot of sense. From the perspective of staying on task and getting it done according to the desired timeline, which is the summer. And if all that was approved, the town, assuming $925,000 in revenue at the end of the year, was still a little over $100,000 in the local option tax fund on a net basis, and so we're still not in the red, and still have some resources. And again, a few of these items, the town plan, for example, the Bath projects for another example, and then line 19, Stanley Lawson Woody Avenue. Those would be not to amount, and so if those resources are not needed, they would not be spent. So we may end the year with a bit more, and I believe I've been pretty reasonably conservative on the estimated revenues for next year. So that's the LOT update. I recognize we haven't heard from some committees yet. I recognize at least one select board member, including that you might, thinks the tree inventory should just be embedded in the budget and not paid for by the local option tax. But it's not as of this moment. If you want to get two votes real quick, it will be real quick. But that's the presentation for everybody.
Thank you, Tom. Questions or comments from the board members?
I kind of agree with Mike.
I think a motion to remove the tree inventory from the local options tax and put that expense in the regular town budget. And I don't know, we talked about that we have a separate budget for trees or something like that.
Yeah, we've got trees spread across a couple of our places.
Separate, but we talked about having that in one place. And I had to have the tree budget all in one fund.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mike and a second by Kane. Discussion, Roger?
My understanding is that this tree inventory is gonna be sort of a one-time deal, or at least one time every 10 years or something like that. And I'm wondering why we wouldn't use the local option tax to do sort of a one-time inventory versus putting it in the regular budget when it's gonna come out next year.
I hear what you're saying, Roger. I'm just concerned about other, a number of potential one-time items. And I think that's just something that should be a budgetary item for. Makes sense to be there, but, you know, I'm just concerned that we'll see in the local options tax for different. And I don't know if it meets the test of what we have is items for, you know, what should be local options tax plus.
I'll echo Mike's last point.
buckets. I don't think it falls in buckets, but I also want to make the argument that for this one time, it stays an empty line item in the budget until we leave. But it continues to be a line item. It doesn't fall victim to anything. Option tax, where a lot of these things change, where we have empty line items. Local option tax anyway, but it keeps it on the radar permanently. I feel like a true budget's gonna be on
To be clear, trees are included twice in the budget, in departmental budgets, both in parks and cemetery, I believe both have tree maintenance lines already that were increased. So the question was if the tree board wants its own line. But just to do the Robert's rules things, Mike made a motion to take it out of local option tax, if I heard it correctly. Kane, you seconded that? We're discussing it. Is there further discussion or questions on this? Yeah.
So my only question is the procedural one, because I think Mike's motion was to only have one line in the general fund budget for trees, and I would just recommend that you look to Tom. Trees on cemeteries, trees on parks, trees are in highways. I don't think you should just have one tree budget that just is all encompassing. Those programs should pay for the tree maintenance that they do. Whether it comes out of local option tax or not, I don't care, but the second part of the motion is wrong.
Yeah.
I just think I don't think it's a one item thing. I think that in a tree budget, there's gonna be multiple line items other than this one.
I would make the fund amendment to Bill's point. Spend this one spending, there's one line item. My argument in agrees with Mike is that I don't think it meets the buckets.
So our note taker here is gesturing, I think wondering how to reflect this in the minutes.
No, point of clarification, the motion was to remove the tree inventory. Very specific expense, not tree maintenance or anything else, just the tree inventory.
Correct.
And so I want to make sure that part is clear, because then all those other multiple, I'm just making a distinction.
I will post this just because I think that the tree inventory is essentially tree planning effort, just like the town plan.
Other questions around? All right, do we all understand the motion we're voting on? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstain? Sure. Sounds like we're keeping the tree inventory and local option tax for now. Is there any other discussion on this? I will note, speaking for myself as a comment, I think we do have a local option tax spending policy. I am noting that we do have funding for affordable housing, economic development, and community vitality, including community vitality, recreation infrastructure, parks and other public spaces, and flood mitigation efforts. But I would say my comment is we should do a holistic review of everything listed here against the policy prior to a future meeting. Is my personal. Sandy. Not to be the dead horse, but I'm. I just want to make sure that there's going to be an article to create a housing trust fund within the guidelines.
You refer to it as a reserve fund, right?
That's what it says, and you, sorry.
I just want to make sure.
Well, in your policy, you put in there that it was carried over every year, which makes it a separate fund. And it clearly defines that. So it should be created in an article to the voters. And then I don't think you have to worry about it because I think they will vote for it. It's already in there. But at least it will be
We call this Sandy's.
Yeah. Is there other questions, comments on the blockchain tax? We have plenty to do on the agenda, so we can move on if we feel comfortable with this for tonight. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's just a follow-up on the planning commission contract. I don't know if you folks are aware, they've made it public in their meetings that the current contractor they're using, they have concern with performance. So when I see that we're adding $15,000 as extension, I just want to make sure that there's also appropriate governance on the contractor themselves. So I've been in 3 meetings, and in all 3 meetings, there's been commentary about the lack of desired performance. Make sure that that's well managed before spending more money to fix that problem. Thank you.
Other questions? Sorry, go ahead.
Remind me what you said, is left in the LOT for this year, Tom, after you made these adjustments. You say everything.
Well, at the end of 2026, we have around $100,000 left.
You talked about 25. Has there been any further discussion or consideration as to what I alluded to at the last budget meeting on Sunday? Maybe factor into the tax stabilization fund moving forward here. After tonight's discussion, and everything that we've talked about is still ongoing, and we still got this possible rec building that we're looking at as well. It seems like the local options tax has been the go-to revenue source. A lot of the list of things that we like to accomplish in our town that haven't had the availability to do so in the past. And again, I'll iterate that we seem to be burning through that revenue source, and I just fear that we're gonna, with everything that we got on our plate, we're gonna overcommit, and we need some kind of a backup to fall back on. Keeps putting it over our heads, as I expect to be built. I'm hoping that your adjustments ultimately bring the tax rate.
Thanks, Chris. Other questions or comments on this? Right, I'm inclined to move us, Tom, preference. Do we go reverse order up from the bottom?
Want to go to fire department, and our chief can inform to that.
Vice President, good staff, please come up. Oh, thank you.
I'm not at home after the
So, there you go.
You got one right there, Gary, right?
I think he was pointing it to materials. Is that what you're meaning?
I'll bring it up on line too. Folks still see that, I think I'm still chair.
I don't remember that yet.
That bill in 2025. Exactly. I just want to give a quick overview of 2026. Duxbury and Moortown dollar amounts might change a little bit, but there was an agreement with Duxbury that was based on a portion of the grand list adjusted for the CLA. And it wasn't a big impact in any one year, but our grand list as a percentage was growing faster than the portion that we covered in Duxbury. And so that was tied to the overall cost for the fire department, but by virtue of the grand list changes, we had a little bit less covered each year. And so the more recent contract with Duxbury just ties it to the increase in the town's tax rate. The raising taxes 3%, they pay 3% more. So that's roughly plugged in. Sure. On the expenditures for regular pay, there's not an actual filled in for 2025 yet. That's a payment we just made, so I didn't have time to update the spreadsheet, but that's end of year. And then the part-time pay is made quarterly, and that last quarterly payment is essentially in the works. I think it was processed last week. But I think those numbers are sufficient to get us through, giving reasonable cost of increases to all those folks that work and volunteer. Going down a little further, most of the fringe is formulaic. If you look at dispatching, that cost is up a bit, not huge, and that's part of that is there's a dispatch agreement where there's dispatching service costs and a capital cost to it, but that's essentially a known number. You really have no option but to pay that bill or not if any calls dispatch in Waterbury, so prefer to pay the bill. And going below that, what I'll say is the chief is really good at holding off on expenses until really we get to the end of the year to make sure that we've got the overall budget run for those things. So the big one down there, and let me point to the slide, sorry, is down line 41, which is new equipment, which is Gary's got an expansive list of all the equipment needs of the department. And in early December, we'd only spent about $40,000 this year, but again, he holds off until the end to make sure that we don't have no so I think we're at a pretty reasonable place for the fire department, less than 3% growth in expenses, and then when you consider the revenue, very similar amount in the impact and property taxes for the department. In the local option tax, it did not. There is some local option tax dollars that would reduce the debt. I didn't show them here, just factored in elsewhere, but that's the debt without the local option taxes. So that would come down to 40 in the future, if that is adopted. And then the contribution to the capital fund, line 45 is 0 because the capital fund has pretty healthy balance and there's no expected expense from the capital fund on a net basis. And again, this is just, now there's the budget, which is how you show it, and you try to show it in a transparent way, and then there's the accounting. For the budget, I'm just showing local option tax because we're buying a command vehicle for the fire department. On the accounting side, I will show local option tax transferring to the fire capital budget and a corresponding expense, but for the budget, I just kept it simple to say, use an LLT limited by the chief of truck. Did you want to talk about the truck?
Which one?
The command vehicle. Right?
So if the pickup truck,
it's this guy at 105.
Okay, yeah, so the pickup truck that it's replacing is 20 years old. It's been a decent truck. As long as you have a place to turn it around. It is an F-350, if you understand trucks at all. I'm not minimizing what you know, but it's a Ford. It's a crew cab, so it's 4-door, so it all automatically is longer, and it's a long bed. And it is not what we wanted 20 years ago, but it was the only thing out there when there was a truck shortage, so we got it. It is time to replace it. Again, it's 20 years old. It'll be a great truck for somebody else that doesn't necessarily need to rely on an emergency vehicle to actually go someplace. I know that Waterbury Backcountry has communicated with myself as well as the manager back and forth about whether they have an interest or not. That is not for me to decide. We get the new truck, the other truck, it's up to you folks or the manager to decide what to do with it. Either work out some arrangement with Waterbury Backcountry, or maybe the town needs a truck, or you just sell it. I don't really care. The difference would be removing the emergency equipment from it if it's going to go to a contract. It's one to Waterbury Backcountry, maybe that stays in there. And then since day one, some of the lights don't work, and over the last year, we decided not to replace them. Just because I don't like to spend the money that we're not gonna have for a while. We would get another one, it would be a smaller truck. Not necessarily smaller than crew cab, we would still get a crew cab. But it would be a smaller bed and something that's more functional for us. And I'm not really vested in whether it's a GNC, a shed, or a Ford. We take a look at all the different places where we can get the best deal, and you, that's when you sit in those things. So, yeah, I certainly ask questions. It's really a pickup truck. That will haul equipment.
This is a different issue. I know we've talked about it before, but I was shocked to hear how much money the Tunbridge Fire Department raises from their coin drop.
Yeah, we don't do that. It's very dangerous.
They raise a lot of money.
We used to do it. Right. It's dangerous. You've got to go through the permitting process with the state. You have to have alternate lanes for traffic. So if you're standing on Route 100, which is absolutely crazy, or Main Street, you have
right in front of the fire station.
You have to have lanes for both ways for vehicles to go around. You just don't have that width. And it's just a bad way to do it. And then it becomes an issue of, okay, so if the fire department's going out there, are we going out there on behalf of the town by a truck? I would say no. It is not for the volunteers to go out and stand there, holding their hands out, looking for money from people driving by to buy a pickup. That's my take. What's that?
Roger, you have a question?
Yeah, I want to get back to the truck. How do you know it's gonna cost $105,000?
It'll cost less than that. When I communicated with Tom, I am not a truck buyer. I mean, I have a truck. It was a state deal. So that was my guess. One of my officers who works for EFUD, believes wholeheartedly we can get it for less than that. We still have to get emergency lighting, have the radios transferred. There's still a cost beyond the truck. And then lettering, which is pretty cheap.
The follow-up question about the new equipment.
Sure.
So 4.9% increase, what's the justification for that?
Well, I honestly, it's last year we level funded. And when you level fund, you actually have less. Because, yeah, and we knew that going in, but we were trying to be helpful, and it was the right thing to do. This year, it's mostly, it's not equipment, it's not new equipment, it's other residual stuff, like building maintenance is very expensive now. Just getting stuff in. We're looking at the potential for a new boiler because the boiler that we have at the Main Street station is the exact same size as we have at Maple Street. And anybody can see that there's a difference in the size of the building. And the last winter, it was constant problems. So we got the contractors taking a look at that and seeing if we actually should buy a new one because we paid a lot of money to have it serviced. So there's a trade-off. Other equipment has gone up in price. Nature is. But what we do, the increase in cost is minute. There's a little bit in training, but in new equipment, there isn't an increase. So we're not buying necessarily more equipment. We've been pretty standard. Last year, we didn't buy as much gear, which is a little concerning because now we've got to try and make that happen. We have a good replacement plan. certificate to say an engineer, so that means he's a spreadsheet. So everything we have for firefighter gear is on a spreadsheet, and he can tell me who's getting gear short of damage right now, who's getting gear next year, or parts of gear, and who's getting it in 5 more years. So he has a 10-year plan on his spreadsheet. I look at it and it's just a bunch of numbers. But we want to try and make that up. The biggest part of that is trying to make it up in an efficient manner, and we're trying to move towards having duplicate gear for everybody, for interior firefighters. Because when we come back from a fire, we should not be wearing that gear again until it's clean. Because all the carcinogens and everything is cancer causing. It's a known cancer causing fact. It's amazing that we haven't had more firefighters with cancer based on what we know now. When I started, I was as ignorant as anybody. I just came across a photo from years ago when I should have been wearing an air pack. And I had a mustache that filtered out all the bad stuff in smoke. So, but that was the old theory, is you don't need all that stuff. Now that cancer is starting to come around. And a couple of years ago, we had 5 members of the department, 1 auxiliary member that had cancer. And all of those could be associated with firefighting. So we try, anytime we go to a working fire, not just minor smoke detector, some working fire, firefighters should not be wearing that gear again until it's clean. We have the extractors, probably would work towards getting 1 or 2 more in the future, so it's a little quicker. But the alternative is hiring a company and coming here and cleaning it every time. It's outrageously expensive.
This might be for Tom. I'm noting workers' comp is up. Is that formulaic, or is there a driver we should know about?
No, it's just formulaic, and I've got to ground truth the actual for this year, because there's different costs allocated different ways, but that's formulaic. There might be a little tweak between now and next week, but it's accurate. There's different fire volunteers have fundamentally different workers.
And then can you just clarify the debt reflected here is what is proposed to be paid with local option tax? Am I understanding that correctly?
It's normal that the local option tax proposal is not factored in here. It's factored into the tax rate later. So if it was factored in here, it would show a reduction, which is for purposes of presentation simplicity. But in one spot, and then local option tax. And part of that is I don't want to get deep into the spreadsheets and then double count something, double count some offset, and come to you in July and say, well, we went to the voters for the tax rate of this much, but it won't be sufficient taxes to pay for operations. So we want to be careful and put it in one spot.
I think I need to follow up, just to understand what's making up the $240,000 of debt and what.
Yep.
Yeah, that's including the truck on there, but that does not need to be right now in a public meeting. Okay,
Question, are we screen sharing right now?
yes, green.
And 2, I genuinely don't know the answer to this question. Does the state pay us for responses on the highway?
Wouldn't that be great? Now, there was a bill a number of years ago that would pay those departments that respond to state highways, particularly the interstate.
Yeah.
And it went nowhere because we're outnumbered. Fire departments that cover the interstate in those jurisdictions are outnumbered by those that don't. So it literally didn't even, I don't think it got out of committee. What I understand, there's not a lot of support for it, and it wasn't a lot of money, but it's still some. And sometimes we're there for long periods of time. Sometimes we don't even make.
Well, Teresa's still listening.
Cheryl has it minimized too, so I can't see it. I saw Chris had a hand. Does any other board member have a question on this? Go ahead, Chris.
I just wanted to follow up on
Thank you.
Kane's comment. Question. Last year, the year before, you said that literally highway calls were zilch. How is it?
Well, they ebb and flow. We have been on to the interstate more than normal this past few months. Don't know why. The interstate isn't any worse than what it was probably 10 years ago. Before we started treating highways, when it was really bad. But there's no rhyme or reason. Cars are going faster, they don't slow down. You could ask any of my experienced firefighters, they'd much rather go to a working fire than go on the interstate. It's absolutely crazy. Especially when you're standing. I'm old, I don't run as fast as I used to, but I still couldn't outrun a car that was out of control. But I don't have that answer. Just no rhyme.
Yeah.
I think part of it is just early winters, when it starts snowing in November, people don't have their snow tires on. And
Right, we went to one a couple days ago, a car, just as an example for that. Car in the back of a trash truck. On Route 100. And as we were going there, we could see the tire tracks all over the road. And I said to my driver, that's the one in the back of the truck, and sure enough. We walked up and they were okay. And I said, bad tires? And she goes, no, they're really good winter tires. And I told her, I said, well, one, they're all seasons, and two, they're not really good. So that's what we're faced with. And that's what we're faced with people that come here to go to the mountains typically during the winter, is they fly in, they get rental cars, and we've had people say, I rented this SUV so that I could get through all this. Well, it helps you to some degree, but it doesn't help you stop. Yeah, we'll see so.
they were my thinking there. My point, and I think following Tom's logic about putting things in the budget and accounting for it by paying for local option tax. From back there, can't see those lines, so the debt service is still in there, Tom, in the budget.
Yes.
Going to be paid for by the local option tax maybe, or some of it, and then we put this in the fire budget. And I think it's good to show it that way because Duxbury should be paying their share of the costs and shouldn't be allowed to skate by on putting our local option towards it. So we want to make sure those things are in the budget. And if you don't need money to go into the capital reserve fund, that's fine. But it used to be a pretty big amount, and it's calculated in the expense of the fire department. Duxbury is paying a share based on that full cost. So just be careful about taking too much out because I'm not asking you to be unfair to us, but it's an expense regardless of where the revenue comes from. Because all of us here, it's not like we don't pay the local option. We all, if we go to restaurants in Waterbury, we pay that tax. So Duxbury shouldn't be getting a break by virtue of reducing their costs from using our option. Thank you.
And then one other thing, so the last couple of years, we voted approval for expensive new trucks. Nothing is proposed budget this year. No, Gary has his eye on one more.
Yes, to replace the last tank truck that is, off the top of my head, probably 8 years past due. It's got some body issues, it's time to go. We locked in with the same vendor that we've used the last few times. Sent Tom the message, the tank truck that we're looking at is a demo model. And it's 414, but that saves about somewhere between 40 and 60,000. It's already in line. And normally you're waiting 2 or 3 years. This one we're looking at in the spring. So if we don't get that, then we can anticipate the increased and plus not getting this demo truck. So I certainly would recommend, both as a fire chief and a taxpayer, that we move forward with that. We talked about that months ago. And then that will be the last truck you'll see me sitting here asking for. We're getting closer to it's time for somebody else. Right. I'm going into my 23rd year as fire chief. So we have a plan. Good.
Continuity planning is essential, and you know that better than I. As first responder.
Transporting Santa this weekend.
It's all good. Yes, we have a continuity plan.
Which I'm just appreciating your modeling on behalf of other departments or volunteer organizations for that matter.
Is a bond for that truck gonna be? I mean,
Not as proposed today, so we could do that. This is the second.
Right, this is a tank truck. The other one is a pickup truck.
Right. Pickup trucks in there. Right. I was hoping to stagger things by year and make that work. Just because I might be sensitive to the tax rate. So. Not in the budget right now, but it's about, if you did it over 5 years, it's about $80,000. So it's about a penny on the tax rate, about a 2% increase from itself. Well, we do have a good amount of money in capital improvement plan, but I don't know the exact hand. I have to pull up the art. I was just hoping to go one more year for a few reasons. One is last year we had some trucks in the 3-year cycle, and that was approved last year. So next year will be coming off soon. In 2027, before we do anything else, we have a $50,000 debt service payment that is gone, which is paid off long-term. So that makes things a bit easier. But we were still on December 1st at 4% on taxes, and we're trying to work that down. So I was hoping to get one more year. That's the firefighting, 2 new ones, and then we're done in training. But you can certainly tell me that.
Is that gonna fall in this timeline of getting this truck?
If it's not in there for the town meeting, we will not get this truck. The truck will be delivered based on the vendor, probably April-ish. Now he'll sell it to somebody else. We have an agreement when we sign for the other trucks that it was ours, pending all the approvals. He will sell it, but there is no guarantee that we're going to get another demo truck. And then, so I'm the soldier, so I'm here telling you what is best for the fire department. You figure it out.
Tom, I'm curious if you could go to our June 30th meeting where we actually have a fire capital plan that we actually made and could look at as we're considering this decision about when things are due to be replaced. And Gary, is this tanker two that we're referencing?
That is
right?
correct,
Okay.
yes.
Which was next on the list.
Yeah.
From what I'm seeing in this, it's under a June 30th.
Yep. That's the last time we talked about
What do you think I'm doing here, but pull the documentation? Okay,
So you're a tanker.
so I just wanted to orient us around, if I recall, the command vehicle is not on here that we proposed buying it out of local option tax, but we certainly had the question about town meeting from voters saying, we're buying a lot of fire trucks very frequently, what's the long-term plan? So I wanted to at least orient us to the long-term plan.
So one other option that's budget neutral commits the local option tax, but one other option is to replace the command vehicle with tank. And that is no, that is almost no budget impact whatsoever, just almost dollar for dollar. You're just committing local option taxes.
Yeah, well,
Years.
if you're asking me to pick one. That's what he said. Yeah, I would go with tank truck, because that is more important than, replacing a pickup truck. It's necessary, but it's hard to say that a tank truck isn't necessary. So that's where.
Yes, and I am noting as we start this command vehicles on here.
Yeah, and I may be over my head here, but if you're talking about local option taxes to pay for this truck, I think you could borrow money in 2026 at town meeting to buy the truck. You don't have to, you buy the truck. You don't pay the bank anything. You don't have to raise any taxes until 2027 to make your first payment. And if you want to use local option taxes, you can do that. So I'm not trying to say that, you know, Tom is wrong. He knows the capital plan. I understand completely. I had a number of conversations with Gary over the years and with Celia over the years, and other people saying, you think we could push this off one more year? So I get all that. It's just that if you need a tank truck, I don't think you have to pay for it at all in 2026. If you borrow the money and start paying for it in 2027.
Also, questions here, will you just repeat one more date? So you're saying that you have an option, and what was that number one more time on the current cost?
On a current contract?
Yeah.
It's all inclusive. I just got the message the other day, 414,407.
And that includes all the equipment.
That includes everything. The last one we held off to buy the stuff that was beyond demo, until we sold the mini pumper. And then we were able to buy that stuff. This one comes totally ready to go.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the board or the public? Okay.
I'm just gonna highly recommend this to the voters in town meeting.
Other questions? Do you have any idea, Jerry?
It would bring very little. I think the last one that we sold this past year, we got 15,000. So this one will bring less. Because it's not as, it was in better shape than the other one, but now over the years, over the last year, it's certainly digressing more. I mean, you know, it's I want to say kind of cosmetic. And the body is good because it's plastic, fiberglass. It's the frame that's starting to rust more. Wash the trucks off, but there's only so much. So that, yeah. Yeah, if you're only getting one, my pitch would be to replace the tank truck. We can suffer along with that pickup truck another year. It's just, that's, we have an engine that turns around at a smaller diameter than a pickup. It's crazy.
Other questions from the board? Thank you very much for coming in and for all the detail as always. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We're meeting again next week, so I anticipate we'll have more updates and talk with them then.
Need, you know,
Thank you.
or the town hall, or
I learned quite a lot about hollering at you tonight, Barry, so here we are. Does anyone have any other questions or comments on this? All right, I'm gonna, Tom, if it's okay, diverge us to commissions for a minute, and then I know we need to return to recreation. Amy, you've been waiting here patiently. Would you like to go? I know we have a copy of your presentation and we've posted online.
Yes. So you are. That.
Yes. Yes, and yeah, okay. Well, yeah, so I just, in this one, I wanted to make sure that we're revisiting our objectives here, and it helps kind of tie us to where we come from, or what we've done. So we've got annual conservation priorities, strategic recommendations to the planning commission. So we've submitted our municipal plan. You'll see that in some of our updates as well, and as well as the select board. Obviously doing a lot of promotion relative to Waterbury's biodiversity and natural scenic recreational resources of the lands. We also be making recommendations and advising on projects relative, which we've done that, and this is those very specific updates. And then develop or cultivate partnerships with other organizations, so expanding what we already have established. Doing that real quickly. One more down. Is intended to ground you into the actions that we completed. So got to attend EFUD's watershed, well, one of our members did. We're going to do that update. Really excited that happened relative to the environmental problem solving efforts from UVM. I came and closed out their whole baby. I do have results to share that. It wasn't a little more thorough than I think we needed to cover here, but they collected some survey data. It's all complementary to building on or moving towards a land management plan, which is something we also have as a goal. So that we found that helpful. There was some educational elements with that project, and we also got some really direct feedback on how to make it done. The Master Naturalist students that we originally engaged, like come here looking for budgetary dollars that we need to spend by the end of this year. We now are relinquishing that request, so we're backing out of that request. That group of folks have partnered with EFUD. I'm not close enough to it. Josh Lindsay's been there for the contact with us. But my understanding is that they'll leverage the student group there in our watershed area. So they're going to pay costs associated with that. That's really more how. We continue to participate in Shoot Federal Wildlife corridor partnership, which keeps us connected to those key stakeholders, and we also can co-sponsor, which we're going to have an event February 26th, but our Still Conservation Commission partners will come help promote that event as well. So, we did kick off our fundraising efforts. If you haven't bought copies, they're in the front office, and I also have some meeting tonight. Yeah, really excited because the kids did great. This was the CrossFit Brook Middle School art students, 14 of them. We've already had some good selling already. We're testing it out as an option. We'll see. We've had lots of discussion around is this really what we want to do going forward. But for this year, it seems to be a really big news. We also kicked off our website, a new website for us, which allowed e-commerce. So allowed us to also sell this particular calendar, which will allow us to also do other selling efforts if that's what we choose. And then it keeps us connected to our newly created Instagram account. Holy heck, this is not my forte. That's one thing I know right now. And to that point, I think I mentioned it last time, we have been able to leverage community volunteer. So we're going to continue to expand our reach there. I did mention February 2026, we've got Jesse Moore coming, present a little deeper dive on habitat, getting into that human interaction, see how issues that are. And we got approved for the MPG. I saw that, I didn't get that from you, though, but I ended up seeing it in the CVRPC's newsletter.
And notification of the meeting.
Oh, my goodness, well, anyways, it came through the CVRPC newsletter, so I really hope that's true. Our plan will be to pick up where we left off last year. And so that would be to revisit Arrowwood and the MPG. To remind everyone, we had solely sought the natural resources inventory for the town. That we were excited to see in the budget. Also attended the CVRPC River Corridor Planning. Got some great literature there. Where Act 121 was talked about pretty significantly. We're learning a little bit more. There are a couple other educational efforts that are up. I know several of our conservation. And as I mentioned earlier, we submitted our natural resources, scenic areas, and flood resilience input for the municipal plan. Next, I'm not showing them all here, so I apologize for that.
And my stamp.
Did you get your? All right, so you all have this copy. The top line, $50 is our annual membership for the Association of Vermont Conservation Commission. That's been submitted for 2025 through October 1. I didn't realize that until I more close attention to it. We have an off-cycle membership line. On stewardship line, you'll see $8,090. I'm saying that's our first draft. But what that translates into is the remaining dollars that were associated with the proposal from the county. And I do have an email into Aaron just to make sure that we are confirmed on what that delivers for us. So I'll make sure that we have it. That's what we should feel very comfortable with this. The printing line did go up from last year as well. This one says $1,000. We do have leaf fair, so there's some brochures typically. We can use some of them, but there may be other items that we bring in. And then, of course, if we do fundraising, what we in this particular event, we needed $500 for the calendars. We expect that we'll need some of those types of services going forward. In terms of the educational programs, so this is the assumption that or our goal, I should say, that we're working under is an assumption that we'll have multiple different multiple different education sessions. This is an increased request from last year, and that's based on Jesse's proposal, which was over $90. And then we did a canvas across 4 other consultants in space like this and learned that they're I will say here though, that one of the benefits of being with BDCC is that they have a time period every year, and it's $800 this year, which is associated with education purposes. So hopefully we'll be able to reduce this request, but that doesn't. I want to say April of 2026. It's not in time for budget, but I just want to make sure you're aware that we hope to lessen our requested reduces. And then the town conservation fund, I'm again requesting funds to be seeded into that account. We don't have any immediate or actually any other items on the request at this point in terms of leveraging that fund for things like land acquisition. It did come up in our planning commission meeting though. We had several members and residents come here and share that their interest in seeing if the town is going to start taking a position on supporting land acquisition, whether it's owned by the town or whether that. They wanted to see the fund have some seated so that some of those code shares costs associated with like PCHP or any other entity that have funds from the town. That's the reason why you're seeing it here, but as I said at this point, we have zero plans, activities, or interests in taking action.
So just so board members are clear too, for the budget, not having their request on December 1st, but I then put $5,000 essentially in the conservation fund. So this is 14,140. Higher math at 98. And I hate to say it, Mike, but if we have a $30,000 municipal planning grant and there's kind of a one-time grant match of 8,090, strikes me as a local option tax item. I'm sure it doesn't strike you that way, but this very much strikes me as the same.
Katie, do you have a question?
Can you just briefly go into that position, what sort of?
We're not, just to be clear. The point being is though, Waterbury Land Initiative has pursued several, they sometimes often look for financial support for those acquisitions. And if the town were to take a position, for say $1,000, $5,000, or any whatever the number is, this particular fund would be the fund. And so the reason why I'm acknowledging like, yeah, seems like a really good idea to be prepared for something like that. If there's a parcel that the town deems is a parcelage.
Speaking for myself, I was also at that meeting, and I think in general, there's a conversation about conservation. You had landowners there saying I have very escalating costs to keep my land open and available. And if that's something the town is endeavoring to keep happening and not have me subdividing out parcels to do other things with, that there might need to be financial compensation. So this is one potential proposal that, again, to be clear, I don't think you're endorsing, but you're noting aligns with that conversation.
I didn't bring up that one because I did my research and it's not due to the undeveloped land that they.
I'm saying on a general, in terms of policy questions a future board might be considering.
Agreed, absolutely. I think by no means are we in a position. Yeah, just a quick look at what we have planned for 2026, nothing to dive into too deep, other than I don't believe like I may not have got to in time with the grant, but we will be engaging planning steps, and then as we work through that, I plan to bring it here. Do I need your approval with the contract or Tom's?
I can sign contracts. Question I have, it's okay. What happens if the, so municipal planning grants require matching funds, I believe.
This is $3,330.
So what would your plan be if that match was reduced to the statutory maximum of the?
So there is a bit of scope of work that can be, or has already been isolated as additional. With records, what we've said is that we did get the grant, we would ask for that because it's a pretty detailed level that we're looking for. But there is scope of work that we could reduce. I'd rather reduce the conservation fund than reduce the services from that. Like I said, we have no active plans to.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Do you work at all with the Waterbury Land Initiative, which is really dedicated to conserving land?
Yeah, actually, we're strengthening that connection. So one of the things to Alyssa's comment around what was discussed by the townspeople at the planning commission, we recently met to talk about conducting a panel, bringing in subject matter experts of the various different types of ways of protecting land while reducing tax burdens, for example, or cost burdens. So we're partnering with the Waterbury Land Initiative to coordinate that. I expect that over time, we'll continue to have more touch points with them, but some of their members have attended our meetings as well.
Amy, I have a question probably similar to Tom. I pulled up your second quarter, and I think at that point with the students, it was like 6,500 over 3 years. And I'm noting we've gotten a $30,000 grant, so we're getting way more resources.
We're not
this work.
using the 6,500.
Right, but you're asking for 8,000 in match, which is actually more than 6,500 over 3 years. So I just was curious. Again, that kind of scope. I think you're
Different service providers.
Oh, understood.
Yeah, so the last year's budget, what we asked for, I think was $35,000 or $33,000 for the NRI. And that we de-scoped that detailed work. In terms of the 6,500, we are no longer asking for that at all. And we're not using services for it. So the addition you see here is acknowledging that it's a portion of our required $3,300. But what that 8,000 strictly represents is a short piece of work. My apologies. Did I answer that correctly? It seems like.
Yeah, I think I could be more transparent. I was just noting that I recognize the UVM students are a very different level of service than you're getting with this qualified consultant. I'm still struck that we received $30,000 in outside resources, and
thank
the
you.
town is still being asked for an $8,000 match in 1 year as opposed to a total cost of 6,500 over 3 years. So I think my question's along Tom's line of scope. Wondering.
I'll clarify a couple things. UVM, first of all, never committed to a wall-to-wall. They only committed to between 150 and 300 acres parcels. So in working with that, which is what we were going to be looking at in the Schutzville Wildlife Corridor, this service is actually wall-to-wall, entire town service. So they are not compared equally in terms of cost and value. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Is there other questions or comments from you guys?
It's just final question, having not looked at the Herald scope of work.
Yeah.
Will the project be completed?
No. No, I the answer is no. I'm gonna have to, because we're re-engaging them, I'll have to find out what their availability to start is and shift the work scope.
So potentially that 8,090, even if on the improvement is like.
Other questions or comments from the board at this moment? Anyone online? Thank you very much for coming in for the presentation. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheryl, I wonder if you want to switch hats to Conservation Commission, or would you prefer Tom to do Parks and Rec? Or would you prefer to come on the 22nd? You're flexible. You're. And just, can we be super clear who you're speaking as in
Yes.
this role, just for the
So,
community? And
I
everyone?
I've got it on the website.
transitioning to Waterbury VT 250 Organizing Committee. And so it's actually really hard to follow such topics as emergency services and conservation. But I'll do my best. So back in August, you folks may recall that the select board did approve the formation of a temporary town committee to encourage, support, develop, and promote activities honoring, elevating, and celebrating the complex history of 250 years in the United States and the Republic of Vermont. So in other words, a local version of the Vermont 250th Commission at the state level, formed by executive order in December 2020 by Governor Phil Scott. And so I went forth and put a committee together. Next slide, please. And so we've had a terrific response to the formation of the committee and a lot of excitement. I think in some ways there is there is interest and excitement in things that feel both, despite some of the heaviness that can be associated with these kinds of big anniversaries, opportunities to celebrate things. And so you see here we have a number of folks. We have Mike Bard, Roger Clapp in the room here with us, Evan Hoffman also in the room, Judy Byron, Joe Camerata, Brian Farnsworth, Carolyn Fox, Ryan Geary, Emily Gilday, and Ariel Mondlack. In addition to myself, these members did elect to the officers, a chair and a secretary, myself as chair and Laura Perrette as secretary. We also began, put a page on the town website. So waterburyvt.com/community/VT250, which has a lot of initial information and resources. Next slide, please. The composition of the committee, I think, is important to note that we have folks from a select board liaison, which is Roger, folks from Rotary, Revitalizing Waterbury, the library, the Historical Society, and just community members who are really interested in getting involved in these kinds of initiatives over the next couple of years. The framework that we are operating within as we consider our goals over the next 2 years to support, elevate, develop, etc. Next slide, please. We have been looking at the collections in the Historical Society to understand how Waterbury has celebrated such moments in the past. And we found that some pretty significant programs and events came out of celebrations both for the town. So for example, the 200th anniversary of Waterbury, so Waterbury's bicentennial in 1963, as well as the 250th in 2013. There was a book, there were reenactments, there was a spectacular, and there was another spectacular celebration with big reasons why. So there is a legacy in Waterbury of marking these events. Next slide, please. Waterbury has a particular place in Vermont history, which has made it a common location to celebrate the state's historic moments, to include both its statehood and the republic. And so we see the sesquicentennial, musical jubilee, lots of Vermont notables coming to town for parades and speeches and celebrations, as well as the 200th anniversary of statehood in 1991. And so Waterbury does have a legacy of celebrating such big occasions. This is what's informing and inspiring us as we move forward into the next 2 years. Next, please. So our current priorities and initiatives include establishing our a domain name and website. And Evan, just let me know before that we have waterburyvt250.org, not .com. Didn't have that info before. We are developing a logo that incorporates both the Waterbury town brand and the state VT250 image. They're not super like design happy with each other, but we're gonna do something anyway. We're also going to set up social media accounts, Waterbury VT250 as our handle, hopefully. There are several grant applications we are looking to apply to with some with deadlines coming up generally in winter and spring. One is the Vermont Humanities Project grants, which are grants up to $5,000 and the Vermont 250th Community Planning Grants offered by the State Commission are grants of up to $1,000. Our other priority that's a primary focus over the next few weeks is education and outreach. And so materials tailored for different audiences to include the general community, businesses, civic and faith organizations, the kinds of people we are seeing as participating in past major events, 150th, 200 and 250th commemorations in Waterbury. And so working with those folks and educating about the initiative and what the state is doing is part of what we have on our agenda. Next slide. We're also talking about a number of events to host as a town committee, to include documentary discussion and screening, reading groups, one on the Federalist Papers, NQID parade themes for the next 2 years, one more focused on the United States, 250th this year, and in 2027, Vermont's 250th as a republic. And again, this is big for Vermont as a republic, an independent republic before it achieves statehood. And also something around a history passport initiative where we would collaborate with partners in town for some sort of history themed item, menu item maybe that would get things stamped and offer something for folks. So something that people can participate in, but also gets them thinking about and talking about what these commemorative moments kind of mean for us in present day. Next, please. So we're pretty new, and so we have put together a rough budget based on what we know we would like to pursue. And first and foremost, having a domain name and website hosted over the next 2 years to cover 26 and 27 is approximately $1,100. Both the domain names and website hosting typically are annual plans, renewal.
Buying the website.
Yeah. I went for $15.
I pay for a .org that cost me like.
Oh, no, the
$80 a year.
domain name itself is a very small part of that. It's like $20 a year. Yeah, the domain name is the cheap part. It's the web hosting.
Nobody uses
with-
that page. Nothing.
So our concern with using a town page is that there's so much information on the town site that it is easy for absolutely everything to get buried. And so it's already buried as it is. And so for similar reasons that other committees like with Plan WTV for the Better Connections Grant and the Conservation Commission for similar reasons as the formation of, or as the building of websites outside of the town website. We also, for this special 2-year initiative, don't want to get buried. And that is the rationale behind that being a budget item. A lot of what we are looking to do is promote, educate, and support, which means print costs for information, brochures, event posters, banners, signs, and postcards. And then we hope to level up a little bit on some events that we put together as a committee with perhaps some refreshments if we did a passport program, a passport activity, perhaps having some prizes for those who complete it and win in a drawing, as well as just some other event materials. So for example, making sure that we have access to a screening. We've been talking about Ken Burns' latest, which I know is like hours upon hours upon hours, but we're tossing around ideas. And so that is our present ask. Next slide, please. We thank you for supporting that we exist and are really excited to make these plans. Happy to take questions, offer clarification. Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Board member questions, Kate?
I'm again gonna fire off a question about your webpage. Cause you can, I'm telling you, buy a commerce webpage from WordPress for $45 a month. That's like $500 a year.
Right, and this is for 2 years.
Oh. Yeah, I guess we're running the money there.
Yeah.
I agree. Are we all deciding that at 9:22 p.m. website hosting is our topic of information?
I was gonna ask about something else.
Please go ahead.
If the ask is for $3,500, is that divided by 2? 17.5 per year.
Maybe. That not gotten far enough in the specifics of planning to be sure of that, but we also have a very good grant researcher and writer on the team, and we are hoping that those grants will come through. So
I guess following up on Roger's question, like, do you have an idea of how much of this you need in the next year for this?
well, the 1,100 is definitely a 2-year ask. So that is so about 500 to 525 for the first year with the domain name and website hosting. I think a number of the other costs I think the print costs will be the more upfront costs. And I would say a good half of that would come in certainly sooner rather than later.
Being on that committee, staying, but I did recommend that they be as conservative as possible. It is less than I originally heard, which is a good thing, and it's now over 2 years. Which
Just for clarification, and it's late. Wasn't the committee created by the select board?
Yes.
You don't need to abstain. Serve on the committee of the select board. Firmly believe that. It's just an appropriation of town funds. You're not conflicted in any way.
We authorized the creation of it, and it was a Robert's Rule disaster because multiple Rotary members recused themselves. So we did authorize it in public and a select board. If Mike's one
Sign resolution on it.
Yeah.
I appreciate the commitment to.
Full transparency.
It's gonna be my recommendation that we put this as a special article.
My worry on putting it in special article is just that we made a commitment to this committee, and then if it gets.
I'm gonna take facilitators prerogative and at 9:25 p.m. recommend that we advise our town manager of our subsequent budget update at our next meeting next Monday to see if there's a way we can work in some over requests for consideration. The board, and then we'll without course of action.
I think it is a community vitality initiative, which is one of the considerations for Washington tax.
I would just now be reviewed on Sunday, the fireworks budget, which is 6 times. July. So the town special fund. Type of applicable.
Which else?
Agreed. It's a journal conversation another time. It's 9:26. We have, in all seriousness, so it's 9:26. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Any other
Yep.
questions or comments? Okay,
No,
Cheryl,
thank you.
note taker has resumed the role.
Yes,
Um,
transformed again.
I give Cheryl credit that it originally, at the last meeting, was $5,000, so it's down.
noted, thank you. I'm wanting to check in with the board and the manager and note that it is currently 9:26 PM, which is the time I had budgeted for our executive session real estate review, notwithstanding review agenda items for next meeting. We still have Park and Rec Department that I believe we updated draft. Tom, is there other things you think are important to review? I'm trying to be fair and candid to the board that we have items that need to be reviewed in the executive session. We probably have some that can be postponed and we have budget items we're meeting next Monday. So I don't know if we want to do a high level review, postpone the entire Parks and Rec. I'm just trying to call the question.
For clarification, do we have time?
We haven't created the agenda yet, but I would presume yes.
And I can do a 2-minute review if I get one down. Where we're at.
Yeah, we haven't made a motion, I don't think, to recommend hiring one yet, so, until earlier this meeting. So yeah, Tom, maybe a quick review of Parks and Rec to round us up this evening. Thank you.
Well, I was actually thinking quick review of just the minute picture.
Sure. Great.
That's okay. So let me pull that up here. So the budget summary is a little different compared to where we were at the first. There's aside from Parks and Rec, there's one other big piece that, not huge, but piece that changed here compared to December 1st. Yeah. So December 1st, again, it was early, we were getting started. I had initially, for the use of the reappraisal fund, $30,000, and I've changed that to 50, and we can have a more detailed conversation. But the fact of it is, we ended 2024 with about $170,000 in the reappraisal fund. We're not using much this year, and we are doing the reappraisal. And the more I thought about it, it seems a bit odd to not tap into the reappraisal fund during the reappraisal period. Number one. Number two, we're using that fund balance as a revenue. So when we stop using it, it's a bit of a budget challenge. The year we stop using it is when the reappraisal is complete, when our pilot revenue comes way back and roaring. So I think timing that loss of the reserve, not using the reserve with the pilot makes good financial sense for the long term. And there is on the website, I won't go through it in detail for time purposes, but I did put a posting about where the reserve is at today, what I'm proposing to use it, how much of it is just a budget offset, how much of it is for contractual costs, hiring people, things like that. But using that reserve a little bit different way and some other tweaks that are really minimal and not worth talking about, so I've just gone through and fine-tuned some numbers. As of right now, we are at 3.37%. We were 4.05 2 weeks ago. And that assumes that the grand list grows 0.7%. Now, the grand list of the last decade, the worst year it's had is about 0.7%. The average is 1. If you plugged in 1%, that tax rate would go down a little bit more. I don't have that number off the top of my head. So the levy, the total increase in taxes is 4.49, but factoring in grand list growth helps us out quite a bit. So 3.37 is where we're at as of right now with some items that we talked about. It also does not include the extra funding for Vermont 250. It does not include Conservation Commission. It does assume that the tree planting is still a option.
51 South Napier list.
Yes, it will. And the irony is that it's likely going to be about the highest year it's ever valued at, because as of April 1st, it's not likely to be occupied. So if it's occupied, it is taxed as a commercial building. The following year, when it's occupied, it's a complex series of calculations, but the value is reduced because it is affordable housing. So the irony is that, yeah, it'll be on the grand list in a big way next year and then go down a bit. No, I mean, the grand list is growing. I don't think in the last, several decades, it's been a year where we're had a big decline at least. We keep seeing growth. It's such a big number to begin with that, I'm not sure, any one building is going to really drive my thinking in that way, unless it was something like Stanley Boston, but it all comes from as a slogan once. So I prefer to be conservative in the grand list. It's nice to come in and set the tax rate for when I know that there's not a problem. So again, recognizing timelines, where it's at today, a little bit more. I still think there's pretty reasonable numbers in there for recreation.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board? Questions from the public or comments?
Just curious, where are we with regard to undesignated fund?
I have to pull that number up from the audit and I can do that. Unassigned investment. So total unassigned fund balances across all funds at the end of 2024. There's 265 grand. The highway capital fund had a large negative, which has been the case for many years, but it's getting substantially smaller. General fund 444,000. So there's a good amount there. I really caution against pulling that for a couple of reasons. First, if you pull from 1 year, you've got a bigger bill to fund the next year. That's your choice as a select board to do that. And then I'm not going to argue if you want to buy down the tax rate. It really is your prerogative, and that will be a challenge in the future to deal with it. Probably try to argue that if you buy it down to zero. My concern about the undesignated fund balance is that Randall Meadow is potentially in front of you and potentially a question, and that's a really unusual project for which we haven't gotten super far in cost estimating, and we're certainly a long way from bidding. And then it sounds like the grant may require us with some certainty. So I'm hoping in Randall Meadow, if you assume the voters approve the bond, I'm also really hoping that more grants will be available so we can live within the confines of that. But I do worry about that project because we don't yet have a home for 100,000 cubic yards of fill. And if we've got to drive it 20 miles versus 10, it's a big difference in that cost. So that, above all else, that just drives my thinking because there's some risk associated with that project. If there's, if you're paving a road and you've only got so much budget, you've got so much budget. So that's how I think about our risk levels. That project is fundamentally more risky than others we've done.
And just say, I don't think they'll make a proposal to it.
No,
Just
no,
want
I
to-
just wanted to understand, and I would just ask a follow-up point because I'm not as clear before. So you said a minute ago, 3.75% tax rate, is that?
3.37.
Okay, so 3% increase on the tax rate, how many pennies is that?
Less than 1.8, I believe.
And is 1 cent on the grant list $80,000 still?
Yeah.
So for $160,000 of a $400,000 undesignated fund balance, and I appreciate everything you said about Maple Meadow, but I go back to 2011 when we had Tropical Storm Irene, and I know the state law I think has changed because most of my career, we were supposed to not have any fund balance, and municipalities began to ignore that law because it just didn't make sense to risk everything to say, my goodness, if anything bad goes wrong, you've got to raise the tax rates. But I think you got about $1 million in tax stabilization fund. There's plenty, I think you have plenty of money to fall back on if you need it. And the tax stabilization fund is supposed to be just that, and you're not supposed to spend it, but it's a reserve. And if you had to spend it, worst case scenario happened, you'd have to figure out how to put it back. But I'm just suggesting that 435,000, take 160 out, it's not to zero. And you've got a long way to go before your budget is over, and I'm don't do it, I think you can't, it's just
Any other questions or comments from the board? Right. I think that brings us to review agenda for next meeting. I had High Street parking, budget review. Any other specific notes folks want to get reflected this evening? For budget review, just specifically.
I did reach out to Rebecca Ellis, town moderator. She has agreed to serve on the committee to look at improvements to the town meeting. Decide to run the task force. So if you're interested in having that on the agenda, I'm willing to draft a proposed the description of what that task force would be and what it would be.
Have that, happy to have it on the agenda. Plenty of budget review, so I don't need more. At this point. Okay. I believe we have executive session pertaining to real estate. We do not anticipate any action this evening. So we'll start with that. Does someone want to make a motion?
I move to find that premature public knowledge of real estate transaction puts the town of Waterbury at substantial disadvantage.
Second. Motion by Kane, second by Tori. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then we would need a motion to start
Your executive session and invite the town manager.
Second, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?